Are you ready for some smart, plain talk on politics, Israel, and the law? It's the Andrew Parker Show. Let's roll. Welcome to another episode of the Andrew Parker Show. Thank you very much for joining us. As you know, each episode we talk politics, Israel, and the law. And this is our first episode of 2026. And frankly, it's quite nice to exit 2025. Enough already. Oh, my God. But this, we start off the year with a bang. We are honored to have with us on the show candidate for President of the United States, Congressman for 6 years from the great state. Well, it once was called the great state of Minnesota. We're going to talk a little bit about Minnesota and the fact that I grew up in Minnesota, and my guest today grew up in Minnesota, and we have very fond memories of Minnesota, very fond. One of the great states of the Union, much to be proud of. We're starting to tear that down a little bit, but we'll talk about that today on the show. We're going to talk about the moral decay around the world and how antisemitism plays such a critical role in human morality. And then we're going to talk about the Democratic and Republican parties. Two parties, I know you recognize their names, been around a long time, quite hefty power bases. Where are they headed? And how might we help? How might we get us back maybe on the right track? And I think that we're just the ones to do it, as I'm joined today by a good friend and really a brilliant policy thinker. And I've thought that for a long time. We don't agree on everything, certainly, and a number of things we don't. But we do agree on a lot, and the fundamentals we do agree on. We're Americans. We believe in the fundamental, foundational values of this country. So the disagreements, can swirl about. But my good friend Dean Phillips joins us on the Andrew Parker Show, and you thought that the mayor of New York coined this, how to get affordable again, or we got to find affordable. No, Dean Phillips, make America affordable again. This was, he figured, he knew what the issue was going to be. And this isn't the first time. He is ahead of the curve on most things, which is, again, one of the reasons that I love talking with him on the show. And over all the guests that I have had, he is right up there near the top. Dean, thank you for joining us again on the Andrew Parker Show.
Great to be with you, Andrew. Great to be with you. And by the way, Make America Affordable Again is I thought it had a great ring to it. And not surprisingly, when I put that on my campaign bus, I took so much heat from Democrats because it sounded too much like, Make America Great Again, God forbid.
Sure.
So just a little anecdote.
No, I thought it was brilliant. It was a bit of a jab, and it identified the issue. But let's not start there. I actually want to start at one of the most fundamental places to chat today on the show, and that is the worldwide moral decay that we see, that you can't stick your head in the sand on anymore. And it's scary, it's dangerous, and we can talk about it in the framework of anti-Semitism, because oftentimes world moral decay starts with the acceptance of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred in the milieu, in the lexicon of the day, in the narrative. And frankly, it is alarming. Post-October 7th, how it has been okay to be openly anti-Semitic.
Is that you're posing a
Yeah, I
question or you
want
want
your
reflection? I'll
comment.
tell you, Andrew, I pause because I'm shocked and dismayed that we're even talking about it. And you and I are part of a generation of Jewish Americans
Yeah.
who may have been one of the first generations that grew up in a country that had into which we had assimilated, into which we had made investments, and the reward was acceptance and integration. And
And your
I'm not going to,
father, your Jewish father, fought for
sure,
this country and the fundamental values. He gave his life
of course.
for this
And
country.
as I know you and I and so many others would do right now, but I'm reflecting more on human history, and hatred has been part and parcel to the human condition since the first humans walked this earth. I think we're living in such an unusual time of connection that hatred is so easily disseminated. It doesn't necessarily now start with those with the biggest physical platforms. It starts with those who have social platforms, not people who have demonstrated capacity, competency, leadership. Everybody is a reporter. Everybody is a pundit. And I'm afraid the speed with which hatred can spread. And by the way, it's not just anti-Semitism; it's anti-everybody,
Yeah.
immigrants, people of color, our country, every country in the world right now. And I think anti-Semitism is sadly in that bucket. And this worst, though, is that I'm not seeing leaders who both acknowledge that that challenge and are rising to the occasion. And that means both in our country and abroad, Andrew. And I'm dismayed. It cannot be normalized. And I'm waiting for people on the right, left, center, every spectrum of American politics and around the world to make the case that it's unacceptable. And I would argue, and I think you would agree, neither party is immune to anti-Semitic elements.
No
When I was
question.
growing up, it was the far right that concerned me the most. Now
And
it's
they
both,
haven't left, by the way.
and they
They
haven't
are
left. And now there's a
here.
resurgence, as we well know. Is the MAGA movement going to be defined now by anti-Israel sentiment, which to many, of course, is anti-Semitism? Time will tell. But the far left, the far right, are both culpable, and we have an obligation. And perhaps this is an opportunity. I know 2025 was a dismal year in so many ways, Andrew, but with the turning of a new year, there's always that opportunity for some reconciliation and the opportunity to push reasonable, common sense Americans on both sides of the political aisle to recognize what's at stake here. So I remain an optimist. I am hopeful that there will be peace in the Middle East. I'm hopeful that Gaza will be rebuilt, and be a little bit of a, as Reagan would have said, the shining tower on the hill, right? The beacon, if you will, for the entire Middle East. And the sad truth is sometimes it takes utter destruction to rebuild. I hope that happens there. And I think with that, at least as a result, as we talked about anti-Semitism, there may be a turning of a page where there can be peace, prosperity, and a recognition that we're in this together, because we surely will uh, drown together if we don't stick together.
Well, I want to, for maybe fear of putting salt in a wound of discussion that occurs across this country, and that is about immigration.
Mhm.
That is about our fundamental values, and that certain people do not share our fundamental values. Their values are far different than ours, and you could go down the list. Uh, and when they spread across through immigration, uh, Europe, and spread across through immigration invasion, is what Trump calls it, the United States. It's something that we can't ignore. The Islamist, the radical Islamist movement in the world, have they brought on, they would say they have, a war of civilizations. Are we in a war that we don't want to be in and that we're acting like we're not in, but we are in it?
Well, if we are, Andrew, I think it's too late. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. Do I believe that there's a concerted, unified effort in the United States of America? No. Do I believe that there are too many that have come to our shores with bad intent? Absolutely. And I have to reflect on our own ancestors. I'm sure I don't know your story, but I imagine ours came around the same time for the same reasons to flee persecution to the one country that offered the possibility of safety, security, and prosperity if you worked hard. And when they came over, we didn't really have quotas. We had open borders at that time, and as long as you weren't carrying a disease and you didn't have a criminal record that could be identified, you were let in, and that's how we operated for a long, long time. So I have to say what I'm going to say with the reflection on our own shared past. With all that said, I look at even Minnesota, immigration in Minnesota. We've been a magnet and a home for the persecuted for generations. The Hmong community, particularly in St. Paul, they supported the United States, during the Vietnam years. They shared the principles, they shared the values, and I think we see different immigrant groups to varying degrees come to America because they believe in America, and others come here because they wish to change it. And I think therein lies the fundamental issue. This is not unique to a religion or a race or a country, but it is a unique challenge to the United States. And I think we should be thrilled that we remain among the only countries in the world that people want to come to rather than flee. Nobody wants to go to China or Iran or North Korea or Russia. People want to come to America for a reason. But if we don't protect that reason, we will not only lose our standing as it relates to immigration, we will be losing democracy as we know it. And I think this
Well,
is time for a thoughtful reckoning about immigration in America. Because if we continue down this path of in further and further limitation, I'm afraid we'll be seeing the economic consequences of that, the social consequences of that, and of course, the America's standing in the world. So I'd like to see a thoughtful reassessment and start inviting extraordinary people from around the world who believe in our values, who wish to share their time, their treasure, and invest in our future, and get back to what America was so wonderful at for so long, which is inviting people who were shunned elsewhere. But we're not seeing that same caliber of people. We're not investing in these people. And I'm afraid the Democrats and Republicans right now have no intention, no capacity, and frankly, no competency to litigate what I think is one of the most important policy decisions we will be making in the coming years. So
well,
it's troublesome, but it is not too late, is what I believe.
well, I do think that your comment that protecting the fundamental values of this country, what the founders of this country came together to create, is something worth fighting for, is something worth recognizing and enacting policy that protects it. And when I see radical Islamic terror groups growing here in this country, being very active and having money funneling back and forth between this country and their home base, wherever it might be, and the number of Islamist groups are legion, and we'd have to spend the rest of the hour to list them all. But there are many, and they are a clear and present danger for the United States. People are going to call me Islamophobic. Fine, call me Islamophobic. You show me when radical Islam has reformed, and my arms will be open. This is not about a particular religion. It is about a belief system that is an anathema to the United States and what we stand for in our foundation, and we can't live together with it. One is going to win and the other is going to lose. And we need to win.
I do agree. I do agree.
Yeah, and I know you do, and great comments though. I'm very nervous about whether the United States and our leaders get that. I'm more nervous about European parliaments and whether they get it. They clearly don't. They're speaking on the floor of their highest legislative body openly in anti-Semitic terms. It's outrageous.
Yeah. If I could say one thing, Andrew, and before I forget, I think it's really important. America had made it its intention, uh, with varying degrees of success, of trying to invest in safety, security, and democracy around the world, certainly in post-war policy, both the right and left. And we're moving away from that right now. And I think the consequences of that are going to be an increase in that unregulated, unmitigated mass immigration around the world because people flee where they do not feel safe, where they do not have opportunity. And I think it's incumbent on the United States and the Western world, if not the entire world, to invest in security in other nations so that we are not subject to the same challenges that we are facing right now. Again, does China have an incentive? No, because people are not rushing to get into China. But countries like ours, European countries, the Western Hemisphere for the most part, I think should unify and start making strategic investments to keep people safe, secure, and ensure opportunity in other countries. And by the way, that means Gaza too, and that means the Middle East. And if we can demonstrate the ability to do so, I think that will be a darn good step in preventing the tragedy that we're seeing right now. And I think about it's heartbreaking to see children, in small boats that capsize in the ocean and die, and with their parents simply wanting a chance to succeed, which is most, by the way. I think we have to acknowledge most people that come here do come for the right reasons. But we're not living in an era any longer where we can be so lax with those who have bad intent, and we are not doing a good job. And I think this is a policy that has to start overseas because once it's at our shores, it is too late.
Well, before we move to our next topic, I just want to comment on isolationism and the danger
Yep, exactly.
of isolationism. The United States is not intending, nor does it desire, to take over the world or to have any sort of implication of such. However, we want to make this world a free and open place for every person as much as we can. And we have such an abundance here for us to close our shores or to close our assistance to others that might be struggling, is wrong. And one other comment about Gaza. Plain and simple, that war was brought to the Jewish people in the state of Israel. They didn't want it. They don't want war and have never wanted war. They have proven it and shown it, and they've offered many different proposals for total peace. But coming out of World War II, and much more since, and it is not that long ago, the Jewish people are not going to lie down and be massacred. And they never will do that again. Anti-Semites in this country or in Europe, in the halls of the parliaments or in the halls of Congress, need to know, with the United States or without them, Israel is going to defend itself. The Jews are going to defend themselves. And they are not going to go quietly for the sole reason that they are Jewish. Dean, I want to turn quickly to, how, I don't want to say awestruck, but I guess impressed I was with your handling of your last campaign, which was first the announcement of your candidacy for president in the face of an incumbent president from your party. Who does that? Nobody does that. People don't do that. I mean, it's crazy. It was, some people would say, I don't know that I entirely agree. In fact, there may be a day where the phoenix rises, but I wouldn't call it a suicide mission, but you knew that if you were to do this, how your party would react.
And that's exactly why I did it, by the way. That's exactly why I did it. Andrew, the number of people that approach me and kind of subtly ask in various ways, did you really think you could win?
Yeah.
And, if I'm being honest, the answer is no. It's the first undertaking of my entire adult life in which I really did not expect to win in the traditional sense. I had a very different objective, and I think you just pointed it out without even recognizing it. It was because we know what happens when
Yeah.
you challenge the king, right?
You
And this is
undressed
Mhm,
the party.
exactly.
And the fact of the matter is, people, if they're being honest, across the board, not like 50%, I'm talking 90, 95% have to admit, because there are those who are wingnuts who, are never going to admit, have to admit you were right. You
Right.
were absolutely right. And then they rushed and brought in Harris, and so what have you been doing since, and
Mhm.
what are you going to do going forward? Because somebody who does what you did, I want to know.
Well, you asked about the past year. I took a gap year, Andrew. Been spending a lot of time in California, kind of shed a lot of the past and starting to look to the future and really contemplating, where does America go from here? I've read and reread George Washington's farewell address. I think every American should be reading that right now because, well, first let me remind everyone he's the only president in American history who wasn't affiliated with a political party. Think about that. The only one in our history. In fact, in his farewell address, he advises this country, his young America, that one of the great concerns of his was the development of political parties and what would transpire. And let me tell you, everything to a T that he predicted is coming true right now. And what I was trying
Wow.
to point out, and I'll tell you, look at I was raised in a Democratic family. Although my great grandfather Jay Phillips was the chair of the Democrats for Nixon campaign in Minnesota back with Percy Ross in the
The last
72.
time the Republicans won.
Yeah, right, exactly, in Minnesota, exactly.
Yeah.
So, at least he could pick a winner. But my point is that, and politics in America is kinda like religion, you kinda adopt early what you're brought into, and then you start, thinking for yourself. I say this, though, because as recently as 2016, I was just your average Democratic voter, didn't vote in primaries much, went out for the general election, and then I was, provoked into action by that election, and then when I was elected to Congress, I discovered that neither party is right or wrong. The whole system right now is wrong. The parties are private corporations. They don't answer to voters. They're not really subject to the laws of the land. They operate in the way they want, and that's what we're seeing on both sides. And all my argument is, Andrew, and it's so simple because it's so fundamentally American, and that is competition. Why are we limiting competition in the most important industry, and I will say it is an industry, in America? If, we don't have just Coke and Pepsi. If Coke and Pepsi set the rules, we would have no Red Bull, no nothing else, right? Nothing else. And that's what we're finding in politics right now. My message to people when I saw this from the inside was neither party's got it right. We need competition. The best thing for this country is to elevate competition and reduce the barriers to entry, period. And that what I did over this past year is really talk to a lot of people, Andrew, about center right, center left people who feel the same way. And I don't intend to be a candidate again. I'm not running for governor in Minnesota, but I
It'd be
do have
great
an
if you did, Dean.
well, and it's
And this
and I'll tell
state
you,
needs a cleanup.
I thought there was a good chance I would have done so. But the killing of Melissa Hortman this summer, the
Oh,
attack on and John Hoffman, I have to tell you, we're all human beings, and you have children, I have children, and I wasn't about to subject my family to the daily fear that sadly too many have to live with right now in elected office, and that really changed things because these
wow.
were not rabble rousing, far leftist, crazy bomb throwing, elected officials. These were relatively reasonable, good, decent people. And anybody listening right now would have opened their door to someone who looked like a police officer at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm diverging. My point is, my intention is to help create competition, identify outstanding people who wish to serve this country with the competency and the ability and the fortitude to do so. That's where I think I can add value because the country, frankly, right now is not ready for reasonable, common sense Democrats or Republicans. And if you look at who's replacing those who are leaving Congress and retiring, increasingly further left and further right. So this has happened time and time again in America. All is not lost. But unless, and I'll make one simple prescription because it has nothing to do with me or you or anybody listening right now. It has to do with all of us. and that means voting in primary elections. If we want to do something immediately without changing a law, without crossing fingers and praying for change, get out and vote in primary elections, and then you have the right to complain. But you don't have the right to complain about a general election in which you did not participate in the selection of the candidates who will be on that ballot. And that alone, open primaries, the jungle primary system in California, there are many ways that I think Minnesota and other states in the country can encourage competition, elevate those from the outside. And then lastly, campaign finance. There are way too many great Americans who would relish service, but would never endeavor to have to sell their soul to the fundraising machine that is required to serve certainly in federal office. And I just think it's time that we have some good conversation about this stuff because these are universal truths. I just had lunch yesterday, in fact, with two of my Republican colleagues, former colleagues from Congress, one whom is a governor now, one who still stays in Congress. And it was just remarkable at how we focused on the things that we all agree need to be addressed. Healthcare, by the way, healthcare, campaign finance, right? Promoting competition. These are universal truths. So we just need some leadership. I'm hoping in the next election we might find American leaders to rise to that occasion. This is a clarion call to anybody listening to encourage that right now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you make a very good point. The political parties control the system. They control who's on the general election ballot, and therefore it is a new day.
Right.
If you want any sort of involvement or actually have your voice heard, you must work through the political party process. You must learn about it. You must show up. And nobody has done that for generations. And so it is, again, a new day. I do want to comment, we're in the state of Minnesota. You've heard of Jesse Ventura, I believe. He ran as an independent and he won.
Yep.
And it was in a race where there was a strong enough Republican candidate, there was a strong enough Democratic candidate where those votes are, and then, he slid in. It can be done.
Yeah. And by the way, and I think people forget he had a great cabinet, affected some meaningful, an unusual, in hindsight, what we thought was a once in a lifetime bizarre event was maybe number 2 or 3 on our list right now. But there were some elements of that election that I think were real positives. And it saddens me that the Independence Party in Minnesota couldn't maintain some of that momentum to encourage kind of that spirit of independence that Minnesota was so well known for. I was in Toronto that day. I remember that election day, Andrew.
Yeah.
And I came down with the flu and I went to sleep early. I had CNN on because I wanted to, I was watching the returns. I woke up at about 3, 4 in the morning and it said Jesse Ventura it was the governor of Minnesota. And I literally thought I was having some type of a medical event. I mean, I really thought, to beat Humphrey, it was Norm Coleman, right? Coleman and Humphrey, 2 very prominent names and, people in Minnesota. It goes to show Americans, when given the chance to vote for an alternative, will do so. They'll do so, but it's awfully hard unless you have that extraordinary platform, recognition, celebrity to do so. And therein lies the great challenge, because it's $1 billion campaign these days to run for president of the United States. And it doesn't matter if you're Ross Perot, it doesn't matter if you're Jesse Ventura. That's hard to compete with. And I think it's time that we start doing it differently.
But I could see the path here in Minnesota. There are a lot of people who don't want to vote for Tim Walz, and there are a lot of people who don't want to vote for whoever the Republican is. Anyway, it would be interesting. Let me ask you before we move into discussing a little more about Minnesota. I want to get your thoughts on the Republican Party and whether there is hope for the Republican Party. I know that you believe strongly that this country needs to have a conservative party. It needs to have a liberal party. Maybe it's best to have several other parties in addition, but at least those 2. And the parties should be healthy. And I guess you won't be surprised to learn, I don't think the parties are very healthy right now.
No. And frankly, I don't think either party has been, quote unquote, healthy First of all, health is relative. Healthy for democracy, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think Americans are very well aware of, how the party system really, really operates and how the incentive structure operates. And that's why you see so many sheep on both sides of the aisle, because the system is designed to stay in line, keep your mouth shut, climb the ladder, make it a career. And one day you too, in 30 years, can ascend to some type of a leadership position. We pay elected officials very modestly, and we create a disincentive to attract the most competent, best, and brightest. And we create a disincentive to serve with intensity and intention, and then move on. Just the opposite. That's why we have, essentially career politicians. So I think both parties have been a mess for a long time. There will always be the ebb and flow of who's kind of up and who's down, because that's the nature of a two-party system. But and that's why I think competition is important. By the way, neither brand, in my estimation, stands for anything clear anymore. There wasn't a day not long ago, and you remember, you'd say Republican. Well, low taxes, right? States' rights, freedom. There are a handful of pro business. Liberals stood for helping everybody and healthcare for all, and there were some very simple, understandable messages. Right now, nobody can understand which either party stands for. And that's why I do think, whether it's another party, whether it is people, you call it what you will, an alternative that is well defined, that is invitational to Americans, in which Americans actually invest and become, partners, if you will, in parties. And all politics is local. And I think it's going to have to start that way. It's not going to be top down. I don't think the Republican Party is in any better shape, frankly, than Democrats as it relates to the future.
What do you
And
think the
I'm with that.
Republican Party looks like post Donald Trump?
I've always associated the Republican Party with, again, states' rights and basic conservatism. And I don't see those elements right now. I don't understand what the Democratic Party stands for. I understand what they say. I don't see the actions. And frankly, the same as with the Republican Party. Donald Trump, you know, uh, a a success story for the ages as it relates to a politician with a marketing mind like none else. But he has made it even more difficult to understand the future of the Republican Party. My hope is that a rising generation of Republican public servants, many of whom I served with and I admire, will kind of recapture the compassionate conservatism that I think America needs and is known for. And I'd like to see the same thing happen on the left. And if we really get down to it, both parties better be start acknowledging and be darn aware of the fact that the base of both sides right now is essentially saying the same thing. And this goes back to making America affordable, Andrew. I don't think we are doing ourselves or our future a favor if we don't acknowledge that there are way too many Americans who are just struggling too much while turning on their TVs and their phones and their tablets and laptops at night and seeing extraordinary wealth being created overnight by 20 somethings. And that is America, by the way. But when we get to a point where so many people have so little and a handful have so much, it doesn't matter what party you are part of. It doesn't matter if you're a conservative or liberal. We are facing the same fundamental challenge. It causes revolution. It has time and time again. It erodes democracy. And it's time that both parties recognize that is job number one. And if they can't cooperate on ensuring that Americans have a chance to succeed if they work hard, pursue an education, follow the law, and give it their best, it doesn't matter. And I think we're talking about stuff at 35,000 feet when the reality is this is not even a political question anymore. This is an existential question
Yes.
about whether or not we are willing to have a really, really heart to heart with each other and start providing a governance system that makes it possible to succeed in America the way that our foremothers and forefathers could. That is what I'm most focused on right now. And it's not a political question. It's an
No, and
existential question.
it's not even a policy question. It really is fundamental to the foundational values that we all believe in, that we share.
Exactly.
And the prescriptions of how to get there, okay, there's disagreement, but we need to go back to that day. I am going to pull and read again George Washington's farewell address. I appreciate you raising it because it is absolutely spot on for today's day and age in particular. And now, a word from our sponsors. A record of success second to none. Parker Daniels Keyboard Law Firm, the numbers tell the story. The last 5 cases our lawyers have brought to trial have resulted in million and multi-million-dollar verdicts for our plaintiff clients and 0 defense verdicts for our defense clients. Put simply, we try cases and we win cases. Hi, I'm Andrew Parker. At Parker Daniels Keyboard, we take our work personally and we go the extra mile. That is why some of the biggest law firms, locally and nationally, send cases to us to handle when they can't. If you have a challenging and critically important business or personal legal dispute that must be favorably resolved, whether regarding a contract matter, a business divorce, a real estate dispute, an employment dispute, a civil rights or defamation matter, plain talk, if it's a big deal, contact us at Parker Daniels Keyboard. Wise counsel, winning results. Go to parkerdk.com. Looking to reduce your tax liability and grow your portfolio? Consider Texas-based Texacoma Resources. They have been delivering results for over 40 years in energy investments. Investors may benefit with strategic advantages like depreciation, depletion, and drilling, but should consult their tax advisors for their specific situation. Call True North Investment at 612-968-3442 to learn more. That's True North Investment, 612-968-3442. Texacoma Energy that works for you. Let's turn to talk about the 32nd state of the United States, founded in 1858. Indeed. And, in the 1850s, very early on, Minnesota was the 3rd largest state in the United States. I didn't know that. I was doing a little bit looking on that. The North Star State, 10,000 lakes, Minnesota nice, cold winters. We have the 4 seasons like few other places do. And we were always known for good government. Hubert Humphrey, Walter Mondale, Rudy Boschwitz, even Norm Coleman and Tim Pawlenty. Yep. You probably don't remember. You were about 3 years old. But in 1973, you hold up the Time magazine cover, quote,
Wendy Anderson.
Yeah, a state that works. Mm-hmm. That was the headline. Wendy Anderson with the... All right, so we've come a long way since those days. We've come to COVID and the handling of COVID and the shutting down of our state. Some say, it was the right thing to do. But, most say there were a lot of people that died. We could have done better, okay? And they died without their loved ones next to them. How bad can that get? Now, yes, it was a pandemic. Nobody knew what we were dealing with, et cetera, et cetera. In retrospect, we could have done better, and we could have done better in this state. Secondly, the summer of 2020. I mean, it's horrific, the murder of George Floyd. But billions of dollars of property damage, law enforcement completely destroyed the 3rd precinct. And yes, the murder was wrong. The murderer is in prison, and that's how we deal with it. We don't deal with it by rioting in the street that went across this country to city upon city that went across the world. All started here in Minnesota, and now we're dealing with a $9 billion fraud because we've got all of these, I don't know that they're Islamists, but they're working under a different set of rules than we are. What's going on with that? 90+% are Somali Muslims who engaged in taking billions of dollars from hardworking people here. And Minnesota, when it's brought up in the national news, is a disgrace. What are we going to do about it, Dean?
Well, let's reflect a little bit on Minnesota in our past. What made our state so remarkable, in my estimation, was it attracted hardworking, industrious, earnest Northern Europeans, from the late mid 19th century through the mid 20th century. People who were not seeking leisure, luxury, warm weather, they were seeking opportunity and community. And as a result, Minnesota became home to more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any state in the country.
Yep.
And we were known. We had distinctions. Darn cold, but outstanding education, clean, effective governance, and a well-trained workforce, available workforce, well-trained, and safety and security. And, for most of the 20th century, those attributes were enough to drive a lot of success in Minnesota. And I think when we saw, of course, first of all, the George Floyd murder changed Minneapolis and the country, if not the world, forever. And we should talk about that a little bit. But COVID changed everything, and all of it for the worse for Minnesota. Take the horror of the George Floyd murder aside. COVID allowed people to work from home anywhere in the world in just about any industry and succeed, which meant that you could be in Florida working for a Minnesota-based company and enjoy the weather and no taxes. And that was a first. And anyone who is listening right now in Minnesota who thinks we can compete any longer using the same policies of the past, you're out of your mind. People do not come to Minnesota for the beautiful weather. They do not come to Minnesota for the low taxes. The only reason people would come to Minnesota is for outstanding opportunity, outstanding safety and security, and outstanding education. And I'm afraid on those three counts right now, I don't see any evidence that we are outperforming many states in the country. If anything, we've fallen behind. And if you look at Minnesota as having built a beautiful foundation over 150 years, we're relying on a foundation that is cracking, that is tired, and is in desperate need of outstanding, innovative thinking. And no, I don't see any of it amongst Democrats or Republicans in Minnesota right now.
God, it sounds like a governor candidate to me. I mean, it sounds like a governor candidate. I want that. Now, let me just comment.
So anyway, I needed to get my 2 cents in about.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Again, I'm less concerned about the politics right now, Andrew. I'm more concerned about the pragmatism of getting our act together. And we're going to become just another average state real fast, and that's going to break the hearts of all of us on this show right now.
Well, that's right, and all that we see in the national news regarding Minnesota is not about the weather and the snowstorm and the cold anymore. The whole era with George Floyd and what was shown on the nightly news every single night, that wasn't good. The whole COVID time, but certainly this fraud is not good. And Minnesota deserves better because it's not accurate.
Yeah.
We need to push back. The reputation for a moralistic political culture rooted in civic engagement and a belief in using government to improve the community's quality of life is what good government is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we stood for. I'm good friends with Tim Pawlenty, as you know, and I just think he did an excellent job as governor. And I think Mark Dayton did okay. I disagree with Mark Dayton on a lot of stuff, but don't underestimate Mark Dayton. But I just think we've really lost our way, and we got to find it back because Minnesota deserves better.
I agree.
So what
can I say one thing quick, Andrew, about the fraud? I think it just so I don't lose this thought. What we're seeing, by the way, Minnesota, we've known in Minnesota for some time that there has been fraud in these programs. Now it's been nationalized and politicized, so of course it's going to be front and center for some time, and it's atrocious.
Didn't know it was $9 billion or even $1 billion.
Well, yeah, we don't. What makes this even more remarkable is, of course, we don't even have a clue, which says everything we need to know that there were not any controls. The controls that were in place, I should say, were ineffective. But, and this is not a good one, when I served in the United States Congress and was part of the the congressional cohort that passed the PPP bill, which I think was outstanding, imperative legislation. We did so in a rush to save small businesses that were on the precipice. And there's no question that, look, I was part of it. We failed to ensure adequate staffing, resourcing, and systems to prevent fraud. And every estimate that I see, both when I was in Congress and now, Andrew, indicates that well over $200 billion may have been stolen due to fraud during the PPP program. Every year, estimates are that about 60 billion are stolen from in Medicare fraud, not misbillings and mistakes. I'm talking about intentional fraud.
Yes.
And this is just what we're seeing in Minnesota is atrocious because we are not used to that in Minnesota. We are a clean government state that roots this out fast and prevents it in the first place. So all I'm trying to say here is it's atrocious and repulsive, but it is not unique to Minnesota. It is not unique to this community, by the way. And I feel terrible for the Somali community, the hardworking members of the Somali community who are busting their tails, building businesses, raising families that are now being cast in this light because of so many others in the community that have taken advantage of the kindness and the largesse and the thoughtfulness and the compassion of Minnesota and the United States of America.
Well, I believe that there is an Islamist strain that runs through, particularly as it relates to money going to the hands of those living here and then going overseas to support certain terror measures. And
I haven't seen that evidence, but if it exists,
yeah, the more of that comes out, I think will support my prognostication of part of what's going on here. Dean, I want to give you a chance. You talked about it a little bit already, but to talk a little bit more about what 2026 looks like for Dean Phillips.
I'll tell you, Andrew, I'm giving thought to how to be a participant that adds value instead of just be another pundit or another voice, and we've got plenty of those. It's loud, it's diverse, it's relentless, and America doesn't need just another voice like mine in the wilderness. What it needs is people, I think, like you and me and others who, by the way, I think it's important that people see things differently, have different propositions and perspectives, but at least have a shared interest in getting something done. And my focus will be in getting things done, getting people to the table. I just made a major investment, my family and I, in a program through the Citizens League that is a state level version of what I thought was a brilliant program in Washington, which was a congressional program that matched a Republican member of Congress with a Democratic member of Congress. And you would travel to each other's districts for a couple days and learn about the issues, meet the people, spend time together as colleagues. And it was called the Congressional Exchange Program. And Jonathan Perman, who initiated that, has now brought that to Minnesota with our support and some others. And next year, we're really going to roll it out in a big way. We're going to have state legislators on the Republicans and Democrats visiting each other's districts, getting to know each other in the spirit of trying to do what we have to do first, which is get people to trust one another. So I think if I can add any value in 2026, I think it will be small ball. You probably won't hear my name much, and that's fine. But I'm going to be working hard to encourage people to start having conversations. Because what we're doing, what I did with my Republican colleagues in Congress, continue to do with them to this day, is start breaking down these artificial barriers that are basically falsehoods propagated by 21st century media. And we think of each other as monsters and are kind of pleasantly surprised when we actually kind of get along and actually see many things the same way. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I think Minnesota can, must, and should be at the forefront of national reconciliation. And I think with that, Minnesota can recapture some of that spirit that we enjoyed for so many decades. So that's what you're going to see from me. And then secondly, I'm speaking to a number of business owners in Minnesota, mostly family-owned businesses, that are like-minded in their dismay about the tax situation, about the change in Minnesota's climate. I'm talking about business climate and concerns for the future. And my message to them is then become participants. Don't just complain. support this initiative like Congressional Exchange or the Minnesota Legislative Exchange, promote conversation, and most importantly, in the absence of politicians coming up with good policy solutions, maybe it's time for the business community with the great thinkers and diversity of opinion that are usually then aligned on objectives to come up with some ideas and inject them into the discourse. So I'm going to be spending time using the levers that do exist to try to encourage that rather than knock my head against the wall trying to create new levers that I think we all know need to ultimately exist, but we don't have right now the energy to do so. So that's what I'll be doing. And I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful, but that will only work if thousands and thousands of more Minnesotans join us in starting to reconcile and make change and come up
Where
with some
would
good
you,
ideas.
Dean, where would you direct someone if they wanted to drop you a
Mhm.
note, give you their thoughts,
Oh, sure.
either a website or an email? I want you
Oh,
to
I'd
just
love to
get
share, Andrew. I'd
inundated.
love to
I
share my
want you to
email.
get inundated
Mhm.
with emails and
Hey, I
comments.
love it. Hey, look at
Run for governor,
after
Dean.
after you go through what I went through in 2024,
Oh yeah.
any email, even a somewhat nasty email, is refreshing compared to some of the things I had to deal with then. My email is dean@phillipsforcongress.org. Dean@phillipsforcongress.org. That uh, is not designed because I'm running for Congress again. It is my residual political address. I see it. I would love to hear from people.
Yeah,
And
I knew
if
you would.
anyone listening wants to be if you want to invest $5, $50, $50,000 in encouraging Minnesota to become national leaders again in good governance, um, check out the Citizens League. I think they're the only game in town really right now that is trying to encourage this. And I think the Minnesota legislative program that I just shared with you is one that people can actually participate in and hold their own elected officials accountable for participating. Right. So I'd love to hear from people, and I'm not afraid. If you got problems with me, let me know.
No,
Um,
absolutely. I knew you would, and
mhm.
I hope people reach out and encourage you to continue doing the great work you're doing. Maybe take a little bit of an exit ramp onto a governor's campaign. But regardless of that, it's Dean Phillips, who he wasn't the first, but with the repercussions that he knew he would get, he may well be, because Joe Lieberman stepped out,
Mhm.
as you recall,
Sure.
quite publicly against Bill Clinton, and he was right too.
Yeah.
I voted for Clinton twice,
Yeah.
and I thought there was a lot he did as president that was quite good. But,
Yep.
Joe Lieberman called him out because Joe Lieberman has principles.
Yep.
And when you're wrong, you're wrong.
Mhm.
And don't mince words.
Yeah, but I'll tell you though, but when it doesn't matter right or wrong. If you get out of line
Yeah.
and upset one of the parties, each party has its own bullhorn. And that's just the truth. You can argue how tightly connected they are, but MS Now and Fox, when you're up against massive media machines, it doesn't matter how right you are, how
No.
thoughtful, how poignant, or what a great prognosticator you are. If you get out of line, there is a machine ready to absolutely redefine who you are, and the
And
prince can
Trump
become
and
the
Trump,
pauper real fast. And Joe
yeah,
Lieberman, and he felt it, and
he
I
felt it.
lament that. Yep.
He and I got to say, Donald Trump has put that machine on steroids. If you get on the wrong side of Donald Trump,
Mhm.
I mean, forget it.
And let me say that prompts me to have to say, and I cannot believe I'm actually saying this. In fact, I'm astounded. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, I did not think I would pay her a compliment on your show. I got to tell you, she's showing me something right now that I am astounded by, and if she can do it, I don't
Yeah,
care. By the way, I'm talking to everybody right now, Democrats,
yeah,
Republicans. If you love Trump, hate Trump,
yeah.
whatever. you know to make us to take a stand that is going to essentially either end your career, remove you from the party or from the club, if you will. I do honor people like that, because Washington is filled with people who will say and do anything
Oh, yeah.
To be invited to the White House Christmas party, to, go to the Situation Room once in a while and appear on the news and look like you're part of the, the inner sanctum.
Some of
When
them
you
are
when you
elected
give that up,
officials in Minnesota, in
mhm,
fact,
bingo.
who will tell you, I'm not voting for the Iran deal. And, they end up
Mhm.
voting for the Iran deal.
So,
Anyway, Dean, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It was fantastic, as I knew it would be. I always enjoy chatting with you about the issues of the day. We come at them sometimes from different
sure.
perspectives, but I always learn a lot, and that's all I'm looking for, to
Right,
learn
and
from
me too.
somebody
And
bright
let me
like
say,
you.
even though I'm not running for governor, I would like to make it clear that whoever might ascend to the governorship after the next election, I'm one of many Minnesotans who would be thrilled to assist the next governor in developing and implementing thoughtful policies to improve lives, improve safety, improve education, and reduce corruption anytime. And the more of us that can be participants in that, the better. And
Regardless of party.
of course.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would argue, actually, I think it's incumbent on a Democratic governor to encourage and engage and welcome and invite Republicans to that table, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And let Minnesota now become distinctive for a good reason, and that will be determined by the next governor of the state about how he or she actually takes that responsibility on. And if it's going to be more of the same, rest assured, we're going to be on the wrong path.
Well, we're going to move it back to I just have to end on a positive note. We're going to move it back to the right path, Dean, with people like you out there still in the game, in the arena.
Thank you.
We still have hope. We
Hear,
still
hear. Keep the
have
faith.
a
Keep the faith.
chance. Absolutely. Go to, I just have to make the announcement. Go to theandrewparkershow.com. Subscribe, follow. We're on all the different social media I don't know. I had somebody research names. I never even heard of them. And, we're on there, and you can find us anywhere. But theandrewparkershow.com. Subscribe, follow us, like us, do the thumbs up. I don't know, whatever things you can do on it's newfangled. Every day they come up with something new. You can also text us. There it is, 952-522-2818. You disagree, we'll go into the mailbag, and we'll take a look at your text messages. I love responding to you have every right to be wrong. You do. You have every right to be wrong. I will point it out for you, but we'll have a little tete-a-tete, a little discourse. Dean Phillips, thank you for joining us on the Andrew Parker Show. And until next time, be kind to your neighbor.
Hear, hear.
For more Smart Plain Talk, go to theandrewparkershow.com. Learn about all of your listening and viewing options. And remember, all the great things are simple, and many can be expressed in a single word: freedom, justice, honor, duty, mercy, hope. This episode of The Andrew Parker Show is sponsored by Parker Daniels Keyboard and True North Private Investments.
Did your employer make you sign a promissory note when joining the company, and now you want to leave, but you're afraid your firm will pursue you personally for that debt? This is Jesse Keyboard from the law firm Parker Daniels Keyboard. I recently represented a client who had signed such a note, and I was able to get them out of their $500,000 debt to their company, which allowed them the freedom to exit a bad employment situation and enter a much better one. Meeting our clients' objectives is our focus at Parker Daniels Keyboard, and in this regard, we win. Our experienced trial team of lawyers at Parker Daniels Keyboard have secured major victories in state and federal courts across the country and through arbitration. We have the legal expertise in all types of business disputes, labor and employment matters, real estate matters, shareholder disputes, financial transactions, security issues, and appeals. For wise counsel, winning results, contact us at Parker Daniels Keyboard, a premier litigation law firm that provides efficient, aggressive, and innovative solutions to complex legal problems. Wise counsel, winning results. Go to parkerdk.com.
Looking to reduce your tax liability and grow your portfolio? Consider Texas-based Texacoma Resources. They have been delivering results for over 40 years in energy investments. Investors may benefit with strategic advantages like depreciation, depletion, and drilling, but should consult their tax advisors for their specific situation. Call True North Investment at 612-968-3442 to learn more. That's True North Investment, 612-968-3442. Texacoma Energy that works for you.